Namaste and in la catch. Welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm Zen Benefiel, your host. And as I've said before with in la catch and namaste, these are two phrases from ancient languages. Originally, namaste was from the Sanskrit. Brahmi is the spoken language. In la catch comes from the Mayan. It means I am another you. Namaste means the divine in me recognizes the divine in you. So if we can start from that place as we co-create our future, we'll be in a much better spot when we're done. So this episode, I want to welcome Dennis Pitocco, who I've known for a little while in association with BizCatalyst 360 and his work with bringing a bunch of authors together who have the same kind of mindset and how to transform our world. Now, Dennis, welcome to the show.
Thanks, and it's just one. I'm surprised we haven't done this sooner, but it's great to be here.
And you know, timing, everything will be there in its appointed time, right? So I want to ask you. You know, we all go through processes when we're younger and realizations and things that set us up for our lives, and you know, revolving around passion and purpose. How did you first have this, you know, inner stirring, and how did you see it reflecting in your outer world? What were the initial entrances that you had, so to speak?
Well, if we're talking about what I'm doing today, it is totally unrelated to anything I've ever done, which is kind of interesting because it's a path. You know, they talk about the road less traveled. This is a road I never imagined traveling, and a little bit of fate, a little bit of luck, and just a little bit of, well, a lot of blessing, for lack of a better term. I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. My entire background before getting into what we call BizCatalyst and 360 Nation Zen was entirely different. It was a military career, and then it was banking. I became the accidental banker because that's where the military placed me when I got out of the service. It was one of those cases where you get into a career, you don't really have necessarily an interest or a passion, but you've got a family and you've got to support it. So you just dig in and do the best you can. So I spent about over 30 years in banking around the world. And that's where I met my wife. She was based in London, England. We got married, we came back to Florida, and because I've been doing so many interesting things like running companies and buying and selling, and I ended up owning a company in England. We sold it, came back, and the best analogy I can give you is then it's like the dog that's chasing the car. We caught the car. Now, what do you do with it? Here we are. We were at a relatively young age. We could retire. We could do what everybody says, you know, travel the world. We weren't interested in that, but too young to say, okay, this is it. We're just going to sit back and you know, do crossword puzzles or Sudoku or whatever people do. So we talked about it. My wife and I go on a lot of long walks. Every morning we walk, and, you know, we said, we're blessed with this. What do we do with this? You know, we've got time, we've got talent, and we've got treasure. How do we divide that up, and how do we spend our life? And that kind of segues into what we're doing today, because we had choices to make. We wanted to travel. Of course we did. But we wanted to travel intentionally, not like you do in business where you visited everywhere, but you've never really seen anything except the airport, the meeting room, and the taxi. So we wanted to do some intentional traveling, which meant whatever we did along with that, we didn't want that to necessarily interfere with that. We wanted to do something to keep the brain active, which is where the website came in. And the third thing is we wanted to do more than just say the words giving back. We wanted to get head over heels and roll up your sleeves involved in nonprofits, which we've done, what I can talk about later. But that's how we got into this, and that's we're coming up on our first decade anniversary of BizCatalyst and all the other things that I can share with you.
So what I hear you saying is there was this intense internal, almost drive that became present. Why do you think that happened?
Oh boy, wow, that's a tough one. We both independently, and this is before we met, years prior, we both had similar desires, but we didn't know it until we had the opportunity to make choices. We both had an interest in giving back, and I mean truly giving back. We both had an interest in traveling intentionally, and we both wanted to do something that made, I don't know, I hate to use the word keeping us relevant, but that could be used in terms of building a website, something we'd never done before.
Right.
So it came about independently and collectively, but a lot of it was just because we had a choice. And how many people at a relatively young age can sit there and say, all right, I can do whatever I want. What will that be? Boy, that it's scary. It certainly puts a lot of ownership on you to say, am I making the right choice? Helped me a lot that we were making these choices together without a question.
Well, and the fact that the two of you came together, brings up the old adage, where two or more are gathered, there I am also. So there's this kind of synergistic energy between the two of you from the
Amen.
desire.
Yep.
And that then this, and I have to agree, I'm back on air after a 30-year hiatus because my wife and I had a conversation several months ago, and she goes, you really need to get back to doing what you love. And that's talking to people. And so I was like, wow, that would be really cool. But I've got a network, but I don't necessarily have a community that I can tap yet.
Yep.
And then you came up, then the GRC, generative collab.
Yep.
And a conversation I had with a gentleman there that led to my engagement with Rebuild, and then Fyodor Ochinnikov's Institute for Evolutionary Leadership came along, and so now here's all these resources.
Yeah.
Right. So it was like, here's the flow, the door open.
Right.
So all I did was pay attention and step in and do what I love.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, this is kind of where you're at too.
Well, that's a good point, because very often we get the question, my wife and I get independently, Zen, and that is, people, they're trying to figure out they're trying to figure out why we do what we do, not what we do, because we can explain that. Sure. And I have to say, Zen, and you could probably say the same thing, the closest we can get to distilling that into a few simple words is, look, we're blessed to say this isn't an occupation, it's an occupation.
Right.
Simple as that.
Yeah, it's because the lifestyle.
Because we could choose to do other things, but we choose this intentionally, and the return on this, as you know, is great. I mean, it's hard to put into words. But
let me try. Where you put, and this is what I found, because I agree with you. I have the Einstein adage, if you can't explain something simply, you really don't understand it.
Yes.
What I found that from a very simple level, it's where we put our attention, intention, and interactions that then kind of magnetize everything else. I forget who the person that said, when you make a choice and you commit, the universe backs you up.
Right.
Right. Because
I hear you. And in our case, it's like jumping off a cliff. We weren't quite sure how we were going to get there. We weren't quite sure how to do it. And let me just say, though, it's 10 years later, and virtually everything we've done some pretty interesting, pretty big things. Mm-hmm. It's followed that same path of just saying, look, we don't know if there's water on the other side of that cliff, but we're going to jump.
Yeah.
Because we can, and we're blessed to be able to, and we'll figure it out. And frankly, we're surrounded by such a good community of people. There's always someone out there that's going to step up.
And when you step off the cliff with the leap of faith that it takes to do so, then regardless of whether the water is there or not, all of a sudden those wings.
Exactly. You sprout wings and you didn't know you had those wings. Right. And then there's the soft landing, and then you get the confidence to jump again. Right. And it just multiplies. And, you'd like to think, I wish I had that wisdom many, many years ago. I've gotten it through jumping.
Sure. Well, that's the only way you can.
And you get braver, and then you say, my goodness, now what can I do with that newfound confidence or belief or whatever you want to call it? So it really has inspired us to just keep digging deeper and saying, look, the sky's the limit here. Let's just figure out what we want to do. We'll figure out how to do it later.
Right.
And what a refreshing way to run your day. I'm telling you.
Absolutely. And you've had the time to develop that. I just got remarried a few years ago, and my wife's from St. Petersburg, Russia. totally different cultures. We had to work through, different ways that we communicate and how we understand each other, and it doesn't always mix, right? So we had to unpack those things.
Yes.
But we really had both of us have this deep curiosity of quantum physics and how reality works from that perspective. And so there's this ongoing conversation that we have, much like yours, of how do we deepen this awareness? How do we live closer to this, and being able to recognize the synchronicities, the serendipitous moments, all of these things increase that capacity that then creates patterns. And once you leap off that cliff enough times, there's this pattern that comes up that, simply by leaping off the cliff, magic's going to happen.
Right.
And it's not necessarily magic, it's science, in the quantum physics or quantum entanglement realm, but it's consistent, right? You can trust it.
I just wrote down that word magic because that defines so much of what we're saying here. It truly is. And if you could just bottle that and sell it, my goodness, people just you can believe in magic. It's real.
Well, again, magic is just science we don't understand yet. Yep. And so that's part of what I'm seeking to find the golden thread through all these conversations with One World and the New World, is how we all say the same thing differently because of our direct experience, not necessarily theory, but how it's worked for us and how we have been able to step into that lifestyle of faith, love, and trust, right? With the passion that we have for helping to facilitate people, places, and things to make the world a better place.
Well, and once you figure that out, boy, is that powerful.
It really is. It's nonetheless magical,
yeah.
Right? Because you're still stepping into the unknown on a consistent basis. You don't know what's going to happen. You just know that something's going to, and it's going to be, brilliant and productive in some way. And you're going to learn a lot. You're going to connect with others and find folks that have a similar resonance. And again, back to quantum physics and resonant fields and unified fields and all this kind of stuff. And you probably recognize it too with the work you've been doing with all the authors and how you're just this magnet, right? That's attracting all of these folks. And I'm sure you've probably reached out a little bit, but most of them have probably landed on your doorstep.
Yes. Yeah. In the early days, you're right. It was more reaching out because who were we and nobody knew us.
Right.
But about halfway down that road, the tide changed, and it changed for a lot of different reasons. But yes, the door knocking started happening, which is a real blessing because then we say we're onto something here.
Sure.
People want to share their voices, and we can help them do that.
Absolutely, and quite well, with a real, a smattering of different personalities and perspectives, and all of them sharing their views of how we can be better and make the world a better place.
You're right. Zen, you're both on a very good point, because when I said earlier, I was talking about how we can kind of feel the sea change out there, if you will, in terms of mental. We've now published, you mentioned authors, we've got almost 900 now around the world on every continent except Antarctica. If you know anybody on Antarctica, please have them call me so I can finally say,
right, we're everywhere.
Yeah, but we published now over 25,000 articles, and in doing so, you have given the mix, and you've seen the mix of writing we've got. It's everything from business to life to culture to poetry to podcast. You get a real sense of where people's minds are. And we also sense the shift in mindsets as the pandemic kicked in around the world, because our writers are from around the world. And we've learned how different it is based on culture, based on your geographic location, but your culture and, where you are on that given day. But we get a sense of where the minds are. And that has allowed us to then spread our wings further, saying, this is where the people are heading. This is where we need to go. And how can we serve that need better? Right. And we're doing that through some, productions now and some Zoom call and just different things that sprout from the unique advantage. We feel like we're on this perch looking down over the earth and people are feeding us what's going on.
Like where I'm sitting.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but there, again, I said earlier, there's an ownership that comes with that, saying, you know, we got this tiger by the tail. We've really got to respect that and
It's
do good,
extreme ownership.
yeah, do good things with it, and it'll just keep coming. And again, we've been fortunate; it does keep coming.
And there was a book I used to co-host a small business podcast called Two Small Biz Guys. My co-host was 20 years my senior. Man, what a wealth of knowledge. And one of the books that we discussed was Extreme Leadership.
Okay.
And it was about a couple of Marines that were on the Special Forces, one of the SEAL teams. And they were just saying, look, you know, anything that you do, you must take extreme ownership and own everything about it. You may not like it, but and that goes with the territory. There are things that we come up against that are there for us to learn from and to grow through. And I think that's what you found and what your authors have found. And so in this, and you mentioned the shift in the pandemic, and I think there was a huge one. We now have the opportunity to co-create a world that we believe is possible.
Amen.
And that it's going to take some time. You know, the big time frame is the shift in ages from the Piscean, which is patriarchal, to the Aquarian, which is matriarchal, and the shift in the people over, or profit over people and planet, to people and planet over profit as far as the agendas are concerned. The only thing is that in this transition, Jose Arguelles and I were talking years ago, that the waxing of consciousness and awareness up to the tipping point, the solstice of 2012, and to a lot of people it's kind of woo-woo stuff, but there's really, you know, there's some science in this, so that increase kind of paralleled the learning or the information curve. And so once you reach the tipping point, what do you do with it? Well, you put it back into the existing systems, right? Now you have this new awareness. You're not going to change your lifestyle or your activity. Your lifestyle may change because now you've got this new awareness. So how do you implement this back into the existing systems? And the first part of that is it's going to create chaos, because now there's an old system that needs to be kind of gently nudged out of the way. Yeah. And, you know, not violently, but it's an old system. It's an old model. And the new model, the matriarchal based one, it is built on resonance and even the, you know, the indigenous three brain system of the gut, head, or heart and the head, where first brain's most important. This is where we feel everything. Even neurology now is backing that up. So here we are in the middle of this chaotic place where now we have two aspects of society that are being not necessarily pitted against each other, but something that we have to deal with in the maskers, non-maskers, vaxxers, non-vaxxers, and this whole systemic fallacious narrative that's been thrust on the globe in the process, and how we come out of that effectively through the care and compassion that we can show to each other. You know, there's more than likely going to be some heavy fallout from what's happening.
And let me talk a little bit about that.
Sure, please do.
It just, I mean, you just hit the nail on the head. But as we watched what we were doing kind of over the last decade, one of our fundamentals has been from day one, and it's only in the last year and a half that we really think we've seen the fruits of some of this labor. First of all, let me back up. Everything we do now, we do have BizCatalyst, which you mentioned, but we created, I'll call it this umbrella called 360 Nation. That's our umbrella. I hate to call it a brand because there's more substance to that, but let's just say 360 Nation is kind of who we are, because people kept saying, you know, we can't figure you folks out. You're doing the publishing, you're doing this. We also have another website operation that very few people know about, but you can find it if you look on our site. It's called GoodWorks 360, and it's entirely dedicated to what I mentioned earlier. My wife and I are dedicated to nonprofits, but we decided about 3 years ago, look, we're going to take everything we've learned and we're going to open the doors to helping nonprofits around the world, and we're going to do it free of charge. So we launched Good Work 360, and we've now had over like 4 dozen engagements around the world, as far away as India, of bringing nonprofits the talent they just can't access. So we've got BizCatalyst, which is the publishing thing. We've got GoodWorks, which is the nonprofit thing. And then we've got this other thing called 360 Nation Studios, which I can talk about later. But everything was tucked under our desire to then define who we are. 360 Nation, it's got, you're talking about, if you don't know what, sorry, if you can't put your thought on the back of a business card, you don't really have a clear thought. Well, 360 Nation, it's defined as rediscovering humanity at its best, period. Now, there are so many things you can tuck under.
That sounds apocalyptic.
It does. But there are so many things you can tuck under that, but with that comes ownership again. Now, I'm going to roll forward to something you triggered in my mind as you were talking. As we got into the pandemic around the world, we've been knocking at this door of humanity for years. We keep saying, look, we can do better than this. We can do more good. We can be more compassionate. I can give you all the words.
Right.
And not that we were up against a lot of resistance, but people were too preoccupied in what I'm going to call their robotic lives. And I don't mean just across the USA, I mean around the world, because we're all caught up in everything.
Distractions.
Yeah. And then suddenly, as we both know, in March of last year, the world came to a stop, all at about the same time, generally. And I remember having a discussion with some folks that I know that have been following us. I said, it's interesting, as we look at that March, April time period, it's like we saw the door to humanity suddenly open finally. And I stuck my foot in that door, and I'm not going to let it close.
Right.
And what we see is we're not like, some people are walking through gladly to get more of this humanity rediscovered. Some people are still resisting, but we're grabbing their arm and pulling them through. But then you look at, what does that mean? Well, in the writing, we started seeing it shifted. We started seeing people, and to this day, I was just on a call earlier today. They said, what have you picked up in your writing and your publishing about what's going on in the world? I said, people are searching for something. Many of them, or a good number of them, they don't want to go back to what I'll call that robotic existence. They don't want to settle for that anymore. They've had a chance, a rare chance that many people in their lifetimes don't have, to stop the music, look within themselves and say, there's got to be more than this. Mm-hmm. Which is a really interesting thing. But what it's done is drive so many more people in our direction, and it raises the tenor of what we do, but it's also inspired us to do more interesting things with that, and saying, how can we demonstrate? Because I'm a firm believer in, we can say a lot of neat things here, but if we're not walking the talk, what's the point? So when it comes to, when it comes to giving to nonprofits, we're saying, all right, we're doing something now. We have a consulting company giving it back, time, talent, and treasure. We have a publishing thing, giving it back. We have 360 Nation Studios giving it back. And we work hard to make sure that we're walking, not just talking.
Sure. And you mentioned that, people are searching. Right. One of my previous interviews was with Anton Chernikov, who was one of the founders of Rebuild. Rebuild was a building regenerative communities festival that has over 100 presentations over a 3-day period, almost 50 different presenters, 700 participants, kind of first of its kind. But the focus was, okay, remote working has opened up a whole new realm of possibility for folks that no longer have to live in cities or be cooped up or be in environments that they don't like. And so there's this movement towards being able to provide opportunities for those folks to shift their way of living and actually participate in building regenerative co-living and working spaces with gardens and transportation, everything that you can imagine, right? School systems and things of that nature. So this is something that I see that it's really exciting, because we've gone from the swing of rural and urban to big city as far as population density. And now it's time for that swing of the pendulum to occur, if you will, where this opportunity now is giving people a chance to redefine their lives and make choices because they can.
Right? Amen. Amen. And I think, and I'm sure you pick up on, there's there's still a, I'll call it a natural resistance, because it's that ugly thing called change.
Right. Well, it's
Right.
frightening to most people until they, you and I, we've been through enough. I've been through all kinds of trials and tribulations, so I've learned to recreate myself on multiple occasions. So I'm comfortable with that. I know what to anticipate, and of course, like with you, I think the faith, love, and trust in that system, if you will, is replete with the opportunities and the evolution through it that we have and the results that we get from it.
Yep.
Conversation right now being one of those. So with this, you were talking about your studio, and I wanted to kind of dovetail because that's a production kind of environment. What do you notice in the general flavor and the relationships and how they have developed in this period of production, if you will?
Great question, because it goes back to, we had no idea how to do what we were going to do, but we knew that there was a need. I'm going to give you a little history here because it connects all the dots.
Sure.
Again, I told you my wife and I take morning walks. That is the one time that I wish more people would spend time on, just unplugging from it all. So every morning around the same time, we walk the neighborhood, and I know the local dogs like it because we're always taking them dog treats, but it's a quiet time.
Sure.
And that's where we come up with the question, what more can we do? Well, that's how the studios got launched last August. The pandemic kind of hit us all around March, April, May, June. So around August, we felt like we were really at some of the darkest times, at least in the USA, in terms of people were looking down, they were confused, things were shutting down, you're trapped, you can't travel. Oh, so I remember the conversation so well. I said, this is August now. I said to my wife, Al, I said, things are really looking bleak out there. We're blessed. We're sitting on this giant mouthpiece to the world called BizCatalyst. We have the ability to touch people's hearts and their heads and their minds because we've got a presence and we've worked hard to build it. There's got to be something more we can do with it. So we agreed then that we would do something bigger, better, scarier than we've ever done. And that's where we launched the studios. And it was triggered upon the following thought. How can we get people, Zen, who are looking down to look up? And we felt the best way to do that is rally around one word, and that was the word hope. So we said, look, here's what we're going to do. This is August now. We're going to reach out to everybody we know, whether it be our writers or just our connections around the world, friends, family. And we're going to ask them one question. Now picture this, Zen. Suppose I just walked up to you on the street, tapped you on your shoulder last August and said, Zen, and we may not even know each other, but I said, Zen, what are your hopes for the future? And then I just shut up and listen, and Zen for the next 5 minutes might just say off the cuff, unrehearsed, I've never thought about that, but here it is. Well, that's what we did. We reached out to everybody with that one question and said, all we ask you to do, don't send us a PowerPoint presentation. Don't send us a rehearsed video. Pretend I'm tapping you on the shoulder. And we didn't know what to expect. We thought, well, we'll maybe get a few videos in. We'll see if we can stitch them in together. Well, we waited.
Have you hit 1,000 yet?
That was August.
Okay.
By September, we had over 150 videos in from 6 continents, literally voices, dozens of different countries, different cultures, different languages. We had age 5 up to age 92. And here's what we learned. And we didn't set out thinking this was going to be an education. Obviously, we had to figure out the technology to put all this together into a production.
Sure.
But what we learned about the word hope, we learned, at least in that point in time, boy, hope means something different to so many people based on your country, your culture, your personal circumstances, no matter where you are, thinking that, somebody might say, what are your hopes for the future? Years ago, you might say world peace, because that's what people said. Wow, we got so...
Yeah, it was an easy off-the-cuff response that went nowhere.
That's right, Zen, but people were digging so deep, and maybe it's because we were in a dark time, maybe they had more time, but the point of that whole production was, if you can talk about your hopes for the future and we can stitch this all together, number one, people are going to figure out once we produce this, you're not alone, no matter where you are. Other people are struggling and other people can provide you with hope. Now, that was the first production, and we launched it on New Year's Day. And it turned out, we learned silly little things. We learned that the longest production you can put on YouTube is 8 hours long. Ours came in at 7 hours, 59 minutes, and 46 seconds. And can I just say to you, that wasn't rehearsed, that wasn't planned, that was just good.
I know. I've had very similar things that, you only got so much time and you do it, and it just, I did an interview the other day. I like numbers. And it would be a 1 hour and 11 minutes and 11 seconds.
That's amazing.
It was just.
So we released it. We've now got about 30,000 views from 100+ countries, and they just keep coming in. And the messages coming in some ways are more important than what we did. They were saying, just thank you. Mm-hmm. I, Dennis, living in Mumbai, India, know that I am not suffering alone. And strange things happen, though, as we're producing this thing. And again, we're novices. We're just figuring it all out.
Sure.
A music producer got in touch with us and said, we really like what you guys are doing. Our musicians that we represent around the world, they can't go to their studios. They can't do they can't do anything, but they've got this great music. We would like to donate that to your production. So we ended up getting over 24 independent music videos, one of which was from a Grammy nominee, and we stitched that into this thing. And then we had nonprofits contacting us saying, we'd like to bring some stuff into. So that was the morphing. Well, that was January. We launched it. It goes on. But then, like I said earlier, now it raises the bar. Okay, here we are in June. Time's passed. We were doing a morning walk in May. And we said, things are looking a little brighter now from where we were last August. The intention of HopeFest was to keep people look up. Now we're going to do something to get people to look forward, and we launched what we call BucketFest 360, as you know. And the question now is, what's on your bucket, or what's in your bucket, or what's on your wish list? Now, we launched that about a month ago. We're coming to the end of all the submissions, but here's what we're learning already. People define the notion of a bucket list so differently for the same reason: culture, location, geography. Sure. And where you might think like the old Jack Nicholson movie, they're thinking bucket list, well, I'm going to take a vacation to Hawaii, or I'm going to learn how to skydive. That's not what we're seeing. We're seeing people go inward. Many people are doing what we're now calling a bucket list of being, which means I'm just going to be a better person every day. And that bucket's going to be emptied at the end of the day with kindness and compassion. And then I'm going to reload it in the morning. Another learning experience, but people are gravitating towards it because there is a reason to now look forward. And it's only been a month. We've got over 100 videos in already, and we got the musical artists coming back. So we're learning the power of a different medium, but it goes back to just giving them a voice and connecting those communities. And the cultural impact, the cultural input is just priceless. I'm happy to say we've now got our first ever contribution from mainland China, which is a hard country to penetrate both in and out. It's an American. He's been over there for 20 years, but he's now contributed his voice from a perspective and through his lens, which is just remarkable.
No doubt. What's fascinating is that this whole process, and I think you'll agree, most of them, is an idea that you're stepping into the unknown, not knowing what you can't do, right? So you've got no preconceptions of what can be done, and you just leap into it, and all of a sudden, all these new things come up. It's one of the greatest. I've got to bring in Doug Lynch for a second. He wrote a book called Strategy of the Dolphin years ago, and he is down Florida now, president of Brain Technologies Inc. His second book was Mother of All Minds, and he talks about the alpha chassis and alpha brain that we have, our alpha mind, and that we're in process of replacing that alpha mind with a beta mind, which alpha mind is steeped in competitiveness, beta mind understands oneness. And so Dudley and I had some exchanges. This has been a decade and a half ago, and he'd written a recommendation for me, and he used the term possibilities coagulator. And that just
That's an interesting combination of words.
wow, right. And because you think of coagulation where things kind of solidify, but it's also you're bringing things unknowns into the present and actually manifesting those possibilities. So it was like perfect, because I don't know what I can't do. I've never known what I can't do. I just keep doing, right? And many things that I've attempted to do, I've had others say, you can't do that. And one of them was in the very practical atmosphere of the aerospace industry. We had a piece of paper that was a design change that had to go through the system. And normally it takes 3 weeks for that piece of paper to go through all the signatures. And I walked it through in about 4.5, maybe 5 hours. And I brought it back and I asked my supervisor, I said, how long does this normally take, and can it be done today? And I said, no, it can never be done. I said, okay, well then I just, and I plopped it down on the desk. Now, at that point, I'm sure I seemed a bit arrogant because I had accomplished something that they said I couldn't do. And with that kind of result, and that also set up, okay, the other things are possible. And the only reason we don't do those things is because we never take the first step to try.
Amen. Very good point.
So and you've taken multiple steps in all kinds of directions.
And it's still scary, but we also believe in those magical words of good karma.
Mm-hmm.
We honestly believe that if you continue to do the right thing for the right reasons, it does come full circle. And I swear there were people just lifting us up at times when we were producing that first video, and we're down to the 11th hour. And we're scratching our heads, but somehow, some way, somebody either reaches out to us or we discover something and it just comes together.
Yeah. Now you mentioned the differences in the diversity of perspectives as to how people saw hope and how they saw the bucket list and things like that. It reminded me of a mentor that I had that was president of the Association of Alternate Dispute Resolution in America, negotiator, mediator, worked with programs with the UN at one point. And he said, from my perspective, there really is no conflict when you have two sides that are at odds. They simply don't understand each other. They've come to the table with two different dictionaries, and they speak from their own dictionary, thinking that the other person understands what's in it. And so the whole adage of you got to slow down to go fast, right? You have to kind of pull yourself back and say, wait a minute, I need to understand this person before I know that they're going to understand me, because I need to know that the language that they use, the kind of terms that they're familiar with, and then how I can respond so that they actually hear me instead of trying to push my ideas in the way that I think and assume that they're going to be thinking the same way. Right? We all think we think the same. Right.
That's no different than my years of business travel, and we used to get the cultural training before you go to Korea or China or somewhere different. Even going to the United Kingdom, I had training on how to deal with the British differently, and it's both respectful, but it also is something that a lot of people don't think about.
No, I knew another gentleman that I eventually brought in for interpersonal skills training at this same aerospace company. He mentioned to me that, in the 80s, when American businesses went into Europe and foreign countries and tried to instill their way of doing business without investigating and getting to know the culture beforehand, 80% of them failed.
Mm.
And so that's when that whole,
something so fundamental, and yet it's overlooked quite frequently. It's a shame. Right. Some of that gives us that brash American reputation, particularly around the world, where we don't have to do those kind of things. Well, we do have to do those kind of things, frankly.
We do, and that's the core. You have to establish the relationship. You have to understand, or at least this is what's come to the awareness of what is now in order to be effective in whatever we do, it's a relationship building. It doesn't matter what the product or widget or whatever service is, it's people that do it all. And so there's this innate perspective, I think, that we all have of, like my opening, in my catch, I'm another you. When you come at life with that perspective, and in self-development, this, you're taught at some point that, hey, the person that you're having an issue with is just a reflection of what you don't like in yourself, right? So that kind of stuff. But it's true for the most part.
Well,
And
back to years ago, remember, I think it was back during Reagan's days as a president, or maybe earlier, where people said it's the economy, stupid. Well, moving forward, it's the relationship. In the context of we're talking today, when all else fails, it's the relationship.
right. And then we're all in relationships on the ocean of emotion, seeking safe harbor.
I'm going to steal that one.
Please.
It's very good.
Well, there's these little catchphrases that we can use that we discover along the way. Some of the stuff just pops out of our mouth and we don't even realize it until after we hear ourselves thinking. We're like, wow, that was cool. I need to write that one down. But these are the way that we share this new living awareness with others in a simple, understandable way. Because it's not complex, even in complexity, and all the complexity studies and business canvases and things around that. In that complexity, it still boils down to the individual relationships and how the skill sets can be coordinated to work collaboratively and synergistically.
I agree with that. Something I skipped over that I should point out, because I often skip over this or forget to say. I talk about we're blessed and we got the freedom and we can do a lot of things. Now, we're unique. We're big. We've got a lot of tentacles, but I keep using the word blessed, and I do that for a reason. Everything we do is for good, not for profit. You will never see marketing. You'll never see advertisements. You'll never see any promotions, monetary promotions on our website. But that gives us the ability, particularly in today's world, to not turn to an advertising board or a board of directors to say, can I do this? If Zen and I are talking today, and Zen, you came up with maybe a great idea, and say, Zen, I'm going to go away and do something with that. By next week, it'll be up and running if it makes sense, which is SENSE versus sense. Now, I know a lot of people don't have that privilege. They've got to kind of follow the lead and kind of go down this hallway with walls. We don't have any walls, which allows us to say, we're going to start a production company. And next week, guess what? It's up and running. We're going to do consulting with nonprofits around, and guess what? It's up and running. Goes back to walking the talk, but it's a privilege to be able to do those things. But it also says, my goodness, it goes back to choices. Now what do we do? Now we're already thinking beyond BucketFest now. We've got a couple things on the whiteboard, which my wife wants to really rip off the wall. Because there's always two or three.
Take a lot of work, right?
It's like conversations like this. I'm scribbling notes down because there are things that come and say, boy, that's an interesting thought. Maybe we can do something under our do more, but it's got to fit under rediscovering humanity as well. And where we go, I have no idea, but I know we'll get there.
Well, I heard those words come out of my mouth just moments ago about a lot of work. I had a conversation with a kid the other day that he was talking about wanting to become a video game designer, and he says, "Oh, but that's a lot of work." And the immediate response I gave him was, "That's a bullshit excuse, right? If your passion's there, a lot of work excuse is just limiting yourself because you're lazy."
Absolutely.
And if this is important, whatever it is, you're going to have the passion with it. And if you don't, then you're not going the right direction.
Right.
Well, because go ahead. That triggered something. I could tell.
It did. Yes. Well, no, I agree with you. It's just You know, well, I was fortunate, maybe you were too. We came up in a time, it's going to make us both sound old here, that you really could, you know, just dig in, work hard, and probably, I think we had the luxury of, it was easier to get ahead with that kind of work versus having, you know, 3 degrees on the wall from different colleges, and, you know, stuff that you got, the hurdles you got to jump over today, that maybe we had other hurdles to jump. But I knew if I went to work every day back in my early days of banking and I worked hard and I jumped off those cliffs and I was the brave guy and I volunteered for things and I worked the overtime and the weekends, that I would get ahead. And there was almost an implied loyalty with that, with the organization. Well, we know a lot of that's left the arena now. It's a shame to say it. There's a lot of talk about employees becoming commodities. And to some extent, that's true. And now you move into this virtual world where they're even more disconnected from the office, many companies. It's a tough one. I think in some ways it's a tougher world to survive in, but it goes back to that discussion you just had with that gentleman. Well, of course it's hard work.
Right.
You know, if it comes too easy, how much do you appreciate it? And if you don't do the hard work, you're not going to realize whether or not you appreciate it, because you're not going to get there.
And that's kind of where I felt in, you know, at that point back in my 20s, I was working in anywhere from 65 to 80 hours a week at the aerospace company. The month end, I was in production control, right? So we had to make sure shipments got out. I was an active member of the church. I was an elder. So there were those duties that were imperative at that point. And I was going to school to finish my degree. And it ended up destroying my marriage because there wasn't that compatibility and strength in the other to stay the course and deal with me not being there, right? Even though this was the course we'd agreed upon, and it was providing quite a bit for us, but I found my heart wasn't in it. I had arguments with my father, my adoptive father, quite a bit. I was orphaned at birth, but had a wonderful childhood. So I got taught all these. Dad was 32nd degree Mason. Mom was an English and lit teacher in junior high. So I got these value systems that were just impeccable. And yet it got to a place where, Dad, you know, I've done this, and because he wanted me to go to work for a company, you know, retire in 30 years or whatever, like he did. And it wasn't working for me. I tried that avenue, and we got in this big argument after my divorce. And I said, look, I've got to follow my heart. Otherwise, I'm not going to be healthy. Right. And I understood that at 31. So my life completely transformed, and I went down another path that, you know, moments of austerity and things like that. Money was never the objective I was after. It was the experience, the exploration, was finding out more to do, the curiosity of, yeah, I want to find out more about that, or I want to go do that, and doors would open, and I have the opportunity. And so, you know, this is a magical life that worked out quite well for me, that most people, I don't think, ever get the opportunity to have. So now we do, especially coming out of COVID, where we can redesign our lives. We can say, oh yeah, I want to go this direction. And I know that there's support in that, because there's organizations like you and others that are already leading the way in doing so. So there's a certain amount of comfort in that. And it goes beyond the uncomfort of the change, right? To know that there's support there. So, and it's amazing. And I feel so blessed to be able to sit here and have this conversation with you about the process, just to kind of expose it a little bit, to uncover it, if you will, in an apocalyptic fashion.
But you've got perspective, and I can say a lot of what I've said and what I've heard you say. You know, people say, well, gee, you're pretty smart, you got all this wisdom. I said, you know, on one hand, I would say I wish I knew what I know now back then, but on the other hand, I had to kind of drop the ball, fall on my face, jump off those. I had to get there first to really have perspective on it,
Right.
Or it wouldn't be the same. So yeah, you might want the wisdom, but too young, too naive, too immature to know what to do with it.
Yeah.
until you actually lived it.
And
And
you hit on a key thing there, the maturation process. Had a good friend, mixed blood Cherokee, that called me up one time. I was trying to chase him down, and I get a call out of the blue. OCO, brother. And so I was 46 at the time. He was probably 70 some odd. And he said, in our tradition, you cannot form or join a council until you're 51.
oh,
And so I had 5 years to think about, looking back at the maturation process and what wisdom was gained and what processes we went through, the empty nesting, even becoming a grandfather, I think has something to do with that as well. But there's a certain amount of wisdom that when you get to be our age that can't be garnered any other way, but we're now so solid in that knowing that we can say, okay, I understand, and here's some support in that in whatever way you need it, right? And we've got the ability to reflect from those multiple perspectives in a conversation or in personal engagements.
yeah.
And it's a cool place to be. And I love the fact that you've been able to reach into that and pull out the treasures of people from around the world and put them into this place that's accessible. And the fact that, that you support them.
Well, but we still wake up every day, and my wife and I talk about it. We'll get a new writer coming to us from somewhere, and I look at them and say, can you believe this person wants to write for us? Look at their credentials, look at where they've been over the years. Look at, my goodness. And it kind of wakes you up a little bit to say, we're on to something here.
Right.
And I talk to a lot of these new writers from around the world. So, help me understand, how did you find us? Why us? And you know what, I hear a consistent theme, and this has changed over the last year or so, like everything else. And they said, well, we heard a rumor that you allow us, if I'm Zen and I'm coming to write for you, Dennis, I can roll up my sleeves. I can write about whatever I want, whenever I want, how often I want, and as many words as I want. It can be poetry. It can be so you give me the freedom to be a writer, where I've written for other organizations where they say, Zen, it's got to be a minimum of 1,000 words. You got to do it every 2 weeks. You're going to have 6 junior editors edit it first. And when we publish it, by the way, Zen, we're going to put all these little advertisements in the middle. So it may not resemble what you wanted, but if you want to write for us. So writers are seeking freedom, and connected to that over the last year is at a time where a lot of the writing freedom has kind of been squandered a little bit, or squashed, because certain words may be said that maybe not be popular. And we're saying, look, we have one editorial policy. And when it comes to that, there is no such thing as censorship on it. As long as it's respectful and not mean-spirited, we're going to publish it from every angle. So people say, you're leaning left, you're leaning right. No, we're just leaning forward.
Right.
Let's see what happens. And that's why the growth is coming on our end at a time where people want their voices to be heard. So, wow.
So let me ask you this. What have you noticed? Has there been one person or a few maybe that have transformed their lives that you've seen by and through this opportunity, where you've made a difference in their, not just their personal, but their professional careers as well?
Yeah, boy, there are just so many. But the one lady that always comes to mind that's been writing to us, and we've had the luxury of meeting her. She lives up in North Carolina. Her name is Laura Staley. That name may not ring a bell, but Laura's been with us now for probably 3 or 4 years. We happen to be traveling across the country a few years back and had a chance to meet her, which we try to do whenever we travel, if we know we've got a writer nearby. But Laura's a case where, if you could pick out a person, Zen, and saying, look at her from childhood until today, and look at all the minefields she has survived, personally, professionally, marriage, children, I mean, and abuse, emotional, I'm just all those ugly things you hear about. But she is one of those remarkable ladies, and I've said this to her face, she has come out on the other side of that. And what she's done with it is not, ended up sitting on the corner of a sofa with a bottle of beer watching TV all day because she's kind of retreated. She has opened her heart, she's opened her kimono, and she has told stories in a way that most people would not be brave enough to tell those stories. But so when I say looking at something or reading something or looking at a video and saying, I'm not alone, she has probably been the most impactful in terms of sharing her deepest, darkest secrets in such a candid, vulnerable way that it's inspired other writers to follow her lead. And what's that done for her? She's gone on to be a publisher. She's published books now, and she's remained loyal to us because we opened the door just a little bit farther to her to say, it's okay to write about that. It may be scary to some people. And wow, I'm just continually impressed by her.
Well, you mentioned a key word, vulnerable.
Yeah, wow.
And that, and I want to acknowledge that, you know, in listening to you, the humility within you is obvious. And I get that, because this process is very humbling, because you know you're not in charge. You're just a willing player on the stage, and and you get new scripts every morning. Right?
Never be under the illusion that we're under control of anything here.
Right. And that's what's been the fallacy, and what's being attempted right now is this massive control effort, and how it's backfiring. And it's going to take some time. It's one of the things I told Lube. I said, don't be fearful. Don't get lost in the narrative and lose yourself in it. This too shall pass.
Yes, exactly.
And what will happen is we'll be much stronger coming out of it than going in. And it may take, you know, a year, 2 years, 5 years for some, even longer. The result is that we're going to be further along and prepared to go into this new age. And I'm speaking of the Aquarian age.
Yeah.
And it's not a bunch of metaphysical mumbo jumbo. It's very pragmatic, scientific, practical, in daily, even moment to moment applications, and how we think and feel, and how we manage that observer within us, and allow it to become present, to, you know, to watch ourselves and be able to say, hey, wait a minute, you know, that thought's not going to go where you know. So the adjustment period, and like Laura's been through, I'm sure she's gone through that process of looking at how she thinks and feels, because the evidence is how she came out on the other side and what she's doing.
Yeah, exactly. It's what she's done with all that wisdom of good and bad experience. And I just marvel at people like that. But what you were talking about earlier about, you know, it's going to take some time. What we need is that one thing that everybody a lot of people seem to be lacking, and that's patience. To step back, exhale a little bit, and give it a chance to work itself out, because it will, and probably for the better if we can be that patient and not try to control it, manage it, and everything else we naturally want to do. Yeah,
those 5 P's kind of really come into patience, perseverance, persistence, passion, and purpose.
Exactly.
But I've also found that there's a 6th in that, and that's practice.
Yeah, I agree.
You got to do it day in, day out, every moment, and not be self-deprecating when you make mistakes.
Yeah.
Right. And that's I think what keeps a lot of folks back is that self-criticism and judgment that they have of not being enough, or even feeling inadequate. And
well put.
Overcome that.
Yeah.
So using that, has there been, what can you offer in the process that you've gone through, the salient point or points that on a personal level and a daily experience that would make a difference to another's life if they were to practice it?
Well, that's pretty, I have to say that's pretty easy, and it's based on all the wisdom that I've gathered over the years. And that is, you know, we talk about time, talent, and treasure. Those are the 3 things we have. And over the years, I guess that mix of that changes. We happen to have all 3 at the same time, relatively young, and we chose to do something with it. probably the best advice I've ever gotten in my life, and it was during my banking career, and I was in my early 20s at the time, and I was faced with some interesting scenarios in the bank where I witnessed some things that some people would say, boy, nobody finds out about that. It's like, oh, no, there's just so many stories where.
Moral and ethical code breaking.
Exactly. And I had a choice to make. I had to define myself. And, it's that old story you've heard, definition of integrity is doing the right thing when no one else is watching. Well, I did the right thing. But at the time of doing that, I was putting my career on the line. I was up against some really power hungry people, but I did it. And that changed me because that became the core of how I was going to lead my life. And I didn't know it then, but that became the litmus test for a lot of personal decisions, a lot of professional decisions, when you're not quite sure where to go and what to do. But I challenge anybody when they say, well, what's the right thing? I think people know what the right thing is intuitively. If they dig down deep, it may not be the convenient thing. It may be more costly. It may be scarier. So, when I talk about walking the talk, I say, look, do the right thing. Use that as your moral compass. And then while you're doing that, do more. Step up, do more, give back. And I mean, walk the talk. When I say give back, I don't mean just write a check to a local nonprofit. Find out if you can do something to help them with your time and your talent. Right. You might be giving them a check. And the end result of that is that good karma that we spoke about a while back there. It does come full circle. I do feel these blessings continue. And I don't mean necessarily of a religious nature, just blessings because we can see the fruits of all that.
Oh, yeah. And it may just be in a comment that somebody gives you, right, or a card that, or a greeting or something like that. And they come out of nowhere unexpectedly.
Exactly. And that says to both of us, boy, you're on the right track here. And it just reinforces the behaviors. So let me distill that once again into just a few words. Just do the right thing. Start with that and you can build from that.
Cool. Well, Dennis, I think that's a great way to end, and priceless offering to our audience. And I thank you for that. And I'm sure they do too. Again, thank you so much for sharing your time out of your busy schedule. Obviously, it is such. And I look forward to many happy returns in the development of our relationship.
Yeah, thank you, Zen, because, talking this through, and you've got such a nice curiosity about you, it helps me clarify our thinking. No matter how many times we speak to people, it really makes you step back and think, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that.
Oh, that warms my heart, Dennis, and you're very welcome. My pleasure, and I'm humbled at being able to do so. So, again, namaste and enlightening. Thank you for watching this episode of One World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and we'll see you next time.